avoiding errors in sampling is a point which must be known to you as researchers, right? Because we are actually creating internal and external validity in our studies. And for that purpose, we must know that how can we avoid errors in our sampling. Because if our sampling is free from any sort of error, our studies are going to be internally valid as well as they are going to be externally valid, right? So regarding this issue, we must know that what is the true representativeness, right? What are those samples, which are those samples which are true representative, okay? And how can we make sure that our sample is true representative? So for that purpose, we must know that how can we avoid errors in sampling, right? While creating representativeness, all right? During sampling cycle, we must be making sure that every stage is the true representative of the proceeding, right? So the point is that our population universe is reflected in our invited samples, and then our invited samples are generalizable to the population, right? Similarly, our selected samples from the invited samples, they are representing the whole population, right? And then the data which is collected from the selected samples and the interpretation and the analysis of the data, they are generalizable to the whole population. So that's the point, that our as a part of our sampling cycle, every stage is based on the previous proceeding stage, and it is the true representative of that. While dealing with human beings, we must be making sure that those features of the population which are under exploration, which are under studies, we must be making sure that those features are reflected in the samples, right? Like for example, the age group of the population is reflected in the sample, and then the size of the sample is appropriately taken, and it is the true representation of the population. So it is not undersized, or it is not actually more than the required one. And then similarly, we must be taking care of color, shape, education, linguistic background, geographical background, or whatever is the point of discussion or exploration in the study. So we must be looking for these attributes of the population, and we would be making sure that those attributes are the part of our samples, right? So each aspect is of the same proportion, and that proportion is also really important. So we must be making sure that our sample is the true representative of the population. And remember that there is no single rule for creating the best sampling design. So it is you, the students and the researchers, who would decide that their study is internally valid and it is externally valid, because their samples selected are the best representatives of the population. Let me just give you one view here, that how can you make sure that your sample is the true representative of the population, right? So let's go to the screen. This is the target population, and there are certain features which must be observed, which are to be observed as the part of the study, like a factor A, it may be considered as age, or B, academic qualification, C, it may be regarding a background experience maybe, or it may be related to geographical affiliation, and then D may be regarding the gender of the population, which is to be discussed. Similarly, E is, for example, the shape or the age group, let's suppose, right? So E, which is a factor, it may be another factor regarding some qualification or some features of the population. Let's suppose this E is a feature which is related to professional qualification, right? When these features are to be explored, you must select a sample which has all these features, all these characteristics, right? So in this case, we are observing here that all other features are available, but E is missing in the sample, right? So the professional qualifications is a feature which is missing here. Okay, so when we would ultimately generalize the findings of the study, or the results of the study, we may not be able to accurately generalize because there are some shortcomings with this sample. So we must be taking care of this representativeness, that whatever is found in the target population, whatever is to be explored, and whatever is the part of the variables to be studied, they must be reflected in the sample. And that's the rule of thumb for representativeness in the samples, so which you are required to be making sure.